Hello and welcome to Fork in Politics. I'm Kalvin Chapman, your host, and tonight we are going to be discussing ISIS soldiers and what should be done with them. According to Wikipedia, ISIS started in 1999 or has been round about roughly since then, and according to CNN, and I'm sorry I'm using CNN as a source, I am truly embarrassed by that, but according to CNN, they started as a splinter group from Al-Qaeda. ISIS first became known to the general public when some of the most harrowing and disgusting footage of ISIS scumbags beheading predominantly British people and putting those videos online. They were horrific and gave a lot of people a lot of nightmares, and it showed precisely what ISIS is. And I will say, for what I'm about to start discussing, anybody that joined ISIS after 2014 knew what ISIS was. They saw or heard about those beheading videos. Nobody in this country did not know about them. So anybody that went out to join ISIS either as a fighter or just to go live in their caliphate, I'm sorry, you are as complicit in the murder of all of those people as the people that had the knives, and as far as I'm concerned, you're evil. It's a bit weird, but Wikipedia says that there's 600 British citizens over with ISIS, and according to the BBC, that figure is 850. And the BBC, there's a link down in the description, or you can go onto the website and have a look there. But the BBC actually name in excess of 200 of those 850 people. So one of the first examples of an ISIS soldier that I came across while I was flicking through the BBC website for this video is a chap from Manchester, and obviously I live in Manchester, so I took an interest in it. His original name was Ronald Fiddler. He changed his name when he converted to Islam to Jamal al-Harith, and allegedly whilst over with ISIS he became Abu Zakaria al-Britani. He was born and raised in Manchester. He claimed that he was entirely innocent, but he was in Afghanistan and he got arrested by the Americans. Now there's again a bit of an argument. It depends who you're looking at. If you can look at the BBC or you can look at Manchester Evening News. I tend to believe neither, but he was either arrested and sent to Guantanamo Bay in 2001 or 2002, and he was released in either 2003 or 2004, but he spent 2 years in there. He left and he became famous in England because it was alleged incorrectly that he'd received £1 million in compensation from Tony Blair's government. That isn't true. He was a group of people that sued the British government, alleging that the British security services were intimately involved in their torture whilst at Guantanamo Bay, and £1 million was paid to that group, and that £1 million included legal fees. Now, as a solicitor, I can tell you those legal fees would have amounted to a very substantial amount. I would expect for a case like that, you'd be looking at somewhere between £200,000 and £300,000, maybe as high as £500,000, and whatever was left was split by the group. But the British press do not ever let a good piece of fact get in the way of a juicy story, so he became famous for having been paid £1 million when he wasn't. To nobody's surprise, he ran off and joined ISIS, which kind of gives the lie to the fact that he was this innocent that had been in Guantanamo Bay as a consequence of completely unfortunate circumstances that were beyond his control. It wasn't. The guy was an evil scumbucket. He went out to ISIS and he decided to commit suicide in a truck trying to murder innocent Iraqis, and as far as I'm aware he did indeed murder quite a number of people, killed himself in the process. And imagine if he'd not done that, and imagine now that ISIS has been largely defeated. They're still out there, but they've largely been defeated. Raqqa is now in the control of Syria once again. Imagine if he'd not done that murder and he came back to Britain saying, oh, it was all a complete misunderstanding. I only went out there because I wanted the pure peace that Islam offers us. He could have been allowed back into this country, the same as he was allowed back into this country when he left Guantanamo Bay, and he could have murdered people in this country. And that people should remember that. These people coming back, it's only pure luck that they weren't suicide bombers out there. We don't know how many of them have shot people, murdered people, beheaded people in the town square, thrown gays off roofs because they don't like homosexuality. I don't believe for a second that any of the 850 British people that went out there didn't know what ISIS was and weren't involved in it in one way or another, whether that's condoning it or actually carrying it out. So my view, based upon the lovely Ronald Fiddler, my view is send a drone out, let's kill every last one of them. Drop a bomb on their heads and stop them coming back to this country. And if they manage to survive and aren't hit by a drone strike, then we should be asking Donald Trump if we can borrow a few cells at Guantanamo Bay. And as far as I'm concerned, we should lock them up in Guantanamo Bay until the day they die. Don't ever let them out the cell, don't let them ever see a television again, and don't ever let them speak to another human being other than a guard giving them food. That, as far as I'm concerned, is what should be done, because we will never know. Every last one of them, as far as I'm concerned, is likely to be a suicide bomber if ever they come back to this country, and I do not care at all what they say in interview. This government is spineless as it is. They're going to come back and they're all going to say that they made a mistake going out there and they only went out there to live the peaceful Islamic life. They didn't. They went out there knowing that ISIS murders people, knowing that ISIS cuts the heads off people that aren't Muslims. And they went out there and condoned it. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes them a likely suicide bomber, and not a single one of them should be allowed to live, and not a single one of them should be allowed to come back to this country, because if they do and they murder somebody, then that will be on the hands of Theresa May. And as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't give Theresa May that opportunity. I think every last one of them should be killed with a drone strike. According to the BBC, of the 850 that they've got on there, there's 81 of the 276 that are named are still alive in Syria and Iraq. 81. And all 81 you can guarantee you're going to be banging on the door wanting to come back. So the point that made me want to do this video was on the 22nd of October 2017, Rory Stewart OBE, who is the Minister for International Development, stated that all ISIS members should be killed and not be given the chance to come back. And this is what the article says. These are people who have essentially moved away from any kind of allegiance towards the British government. They are absolutely dedicated as members of the Islamic State towards the creation of a caliphate. They believe in an extremely hateful doctrine which involves killing themselves, killing others, and trying to use violence and brutality to create an 8th century or 7th century state. So I'm afraid we have to be serious about the fact that these people are a serious danger to us, and unfortunately the only way of dealing with them will be, in almost every case, to kill them. and I wholeheartedly agree with that. On the website, which the link is up there, I've given all of the current treason acts that are out there, and unfortunately it does mean that there will be difficulty in trying these people for treason. I do think it's possible to try them for treason, but I think the government now needs to look at, this is what they did in the Second World War, because these people, so a good one would be a chap called John Amory. He was the son of Secretary of State Leo Amory, and he ran off to help the Germans, and he tried, over in Germany, tried recruiting British prisoners of war who almost entirely told him where he could shove it. So when he came back at the end of the war, they charged him with 3 counts of treason, for things that he'd done in England, but because most of what he wanted to do was to aid and help the enemy, but not necessarily direct that anger towards England, and John Amory for the most part was not interested in Germany defeating England. He was only bothered about the Germans defeating the Russians, and that's why he went and helped. There is no treason within that, and if these people are saying that they went out to Raqqa or to wherever in Syria and Iraq to help Islamic State, they aren't necessarily plotting the overthrow of England, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and as such there is no treason within what they've done. So what they did in the Second World War was create the Treachery Act 1940, and John Amory was charged with 5 counts under that, and he was executed. He pleaded guilty to all 8 counts, 3 for treason, 5 for treachery. And he was executed for it, and it was embarrassing for his brother, who was also an MP, and his father, who, as I mentioned, used to be the Secretary of State for India. I think we need to get some retrospective legislation out there to get these Islamic State members, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't normally agree with the death penalty because we get things in criminal law wrong too often, but you've either lived in the Islamic State or you haven't, so it's very difficult to get that wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, every single one of them should be executed. So it's a contentious issue. Do leave your comments below, reach out to me on Twitter, tell me what you think. But I'd be interested in those that think we should allow these evil people to come back to England and just carry on as if they'd never left. I imagine that you don't like my view that we should execute them, so I would be genuinely interested in seeing what your view is. So that's the end. Many thanks. Bye bye.